Welcome back to Cheap Pop, everybody. This is Derek Kirby back again with my friend Matt Carlin, and we are diving in to one of the bigger film releases this year. I believe it was in theaters. Do you recall, actually? I know it was obviously HBO Max, but was it also in theaters?
Oh, it was because I went to see it in theaters.
That's right. I remember that now. Yeah. So this was a huge release this year. People kind of joked it was the savior of like the home release film setup and everything like that, because you'd had some bombs before that being like Wonder Woman 1984 and things of that nature. This is Godzilla vs. Kong. It is, I guess you would say, a remake of the 1962 original film, which was coincidentally only the third Godzilla film, which played a big part in why Kong won in the original. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yep. And it was actually started out, Toho was trying to get the rights to Toho's, who owns Godzilla. Toho was trying to get the rights to do a King Kong film. And originally they were trying to make a King Kong versus Frankenstein movie where it was going to be a giant kaiju-sized Frankenstein. And thank God that fell apart. And eventually they decided, you know what, let's dust off this Godzilla character, because they did the original 1954, rushed out a sequel in 1955. Then it went dormant for 7 years. And they were like, okay, let's bring back Godzilla and we'll do a crossover with Kong. But they were so, I guess, blown away that they were given the rights to use the King Kong character they wanted to use, that as kind of a show of respect. They're like, look, it'll be a more or less stalemate, but we'll let you basically have your monster get the win in the end, even though they had to really stretch beyond their bounds to do it, right? Like King Kong had to go from like 25 feet tall in the original. All the previous King Kong films, he was only like 25 feet tall. They had to stretch him up to at least 40 feet tall because that's the original Godzilla height. And then they had to like shoehorn in like something. Did you ever see the original?
I did not. No, I didn't.
There is some kind of like berry or something on the island that basically Kong eats or drinks, because the villagers like prepare it like a beverage for him that makes you grow, apparently. It's never explored again. It's just how they explain his sudden growth and his tremendous growth in size. And then in the final minutes of the film, they go, hey, you know what King Kong needs? Electricity powers. And we're just going to say that suddenly works on Godzilla, even though every other Godzilla movie, he literally walks through power lines. It makes no sense. It's pretty bad. I don't understand it. And rewatching that fairly recently, I was like, I probably watched this film 25 times as a kid. I still have nostalgia for it, but like, this is off the walls campiness. It's also when Godzilla took the hard turn more into that like kid friendly humor and like less dark than the first two, for sure.
So we're talking Kong with electricity powers. I mean, that kind of sounds like what I was looking at Ghidorah shooting out in the King of the Monsters. So what exactly is Ghidorah's? I mean, it looks like lightning, at least.
Yeah, it's basically lightning. I mean, it's not technically lightning. Like, I'm sure if you looked at the explanation of it, it's some kind of plasma something or whatever, but it's basically a lightning effect. And Kong's powers weren't like that. It was almost like it was like a static shock. Like he'd grab Godzilla's tail and you'd see like these little electricity effects around his hands and Godzilla's tail, and Godzilla's like what's going on back there? It's so cheesy.
That's rough.
Oh yeah, so rough. But yeah,
that just goes into the never-ending saga of what hurts Godzilla and what helps him, because it seems to be all over the map as far as what is doing damage and what is healing him for some reason. The same, this atomic weapon is somehow healing him and destroying everything else in the nearby radius, but a giant dragon kicking his ass is doing some serious damage.
Oh, for sure. And like, and that inconsistency has always been in there in the series. Like there's in the Millennium series, he literally takes like a meteor to the face and then fights the ultimate form of King Ghidorah and wins. Like talk about OP, like just superpowered to the max, and shrugged off a meteor. Like, all right, let's go fight now. And then in this, to your point, the previous film, the way you recharged him was setting off a nuke about 2 inches from his face. He comes up and he's like exerting all this power. Then he goes into burning Godzilla mode later and melts Ghidorah effectively with that. So it's like, oh, okay, so that charges him. But then in this movie, just random missiles from like planes are hurting him or like knocking him off grounds. Like there's a time like in the very first fight we have, which is the backdrop here with us against Kong on the helicarrier and all of that, where Godzilla is about to blast him with his atomic breath. Kong is dead to rights, and just like 2 planes fly over, drop bombs on him, and he like it's thrown off.
It makes no sense. So it's like, I get the radiation. The radiation makes sense. You've got this, atomic being almost, which feeds off radiation. Okay, I buy that. And when they did like the Muto, and he's, I don't know, essentially like stealing energy from these bombs, I'm like, okay, I buy that. That makes more sense to me because it's taking the radiation, but you're completely discounting what this blast is doing. Like if you get hit and that's causing you pain, imagine a rock going into any part of your body at as fast as I could possibly fathom a bomb exploding is sending it in your direction. It's Pacific Rim logic. Yeah. It's like somehow a sword is going to do more damage than if we blow it up with a nuke. It makes no sense.
Oh no, for sure. And there's even a thing in the 2014 film, the first legendary Godzilla film, where at the Golden Gate Bridge, where he's standing up and like he is essentially shielding the people on the bridge from the missiles coming in. Missiles hit his dorsal fins and he totally no-sells it. Just kind of keeps going about his business. And then in this film, anything hits him anywhere from a missile and he's thrown off. There's a moment in this too where early on he's about to kill Kong in round 1. Now, granted, he's on his home turf, the water. He drags Kong down underwater and he's just swimming, dragging him down. Kong's already been underwater for a while. So he should already be like, he's literally like gasping, like he's drowning. And they say something like, oh, fire the depth charges to disorient Godzilla. And I was like, wouldn't that disorient Kong as well, who's already drowning? Like those are explosions underwater. I feel like you should be killing at least Kong right now, maybe disorienting Godzilla.
Struggling for air. Now try it with a bomb going off next to you. That's really going to help.
Or a dozen bombs, like it's just like, what's happening here?
And then he just kind of books after that, right? Like
it makes no sense. Godzilla has it won. And they're like, turn off the engines, and that'll take care of it. So we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. So let's rewind real quick. So the premise of this film, the only way you can make a matchup like this work is if you have motivations that fit both characters for why they have to fight. Their goals have to be at odds with one another. And Kong, we're told like, oh, well, Kong bows to no one, right? We're told, I don't even know if we're told directly in the films, but we're told that Kong ignored in King of the Monsters when Ghidorah called on all the Titans to attack. Worldwide, all the Titans attacked, other than Godzilla, the other alpha, and Kong ignored it. And
all we really see at that time is we see a little blip on in the last movie, we see like a little blip on the radar that shows there's a monster on Skull Island.
Yeah.
So, it's like I just don't understand what exactly it is about the island. It's like, why? It's like, okay, he's the alpha of this island, but if he leaves the island, he's a threat now.
And they tell you that as well, where they're like, they have him in that research facility at the beginning where they're trying to make it look like his environment. And they're saying like, if we take him off of the island, Godzilla will come for him. And I'm like, if Godzilla chases down any alpha threat, which is why he fought Ghidorah, because it was another alpha threat, if he's going to go to the ends of the earth, literally, to fight you to the death just for the right to be the alpha predator in this case, why is he unaware of Skull Island? How is he unaware of Skull Island? And like there's just nothing presented there. Like I thought that was really weird how there's just this one place where he like doesn't know about
he either
what's
doesn't
going
know
on.
or doesn't care about. I mean, my thought is, if I'm Godzilla, you know, I've got a rogue alpha, but he's literally never left this island for his entire life. That's not much of a threat. I mean, Godzilla is just like, I'm in the water, I'm going to Hollow Earth, I'm coming back up, I'm all over the world, no problem. Kong literally can't leave unless somebody baby carries him to a new location. So, I mean, maybe that's the reason, but it just seems even more unrealistic that they take him out of that environment. And speaking of the environment, it's still Skull Island. They're on Skull Island in a now confined version that for some reason they're like, oh, you know, he's figuring out the environment. You think he doesn't realize that the new environment is much smaller than the old one? And he's got to have some concept of like, okay, what time of year is it? What is the weather going to be? I mean, he's been there for
those construction sounds?
Yeah, it's like he didn't witness all of this.
He's waking up. And then he's waking up on a Saturday morning like, it's 7:00. What are you doing? Why are you already drilling?
We sedated him for 4 years while we built this facility, which, I mean, thank God at least they're like, okay, we're on Skull Island. I was like, if you are going to tell me that you put all of this, like, you know, habitat together with nothing, like if we were going to be in like New York City or something like that, I was going to be like, this is outrageous. Like, this is way too much vegetation to like make. Of course, I'm picking that apart in a monster movie. It makes no sense. But I don't understand the habitat. Why do they need it? It's because they feel some sort of control, but they still let him roam free. So the habitat didn't make any sense to me, or their reasoning of why he can't stay there. I mean, was that explored more and I missed it?
No. I mean, I rewatched it just yesterday and they never explain. They say something like, oh, he's figuring out it's a habitat. It's not safe to keep him here. And it's like, but he's been here his whole life without any issues. He is on this island. Struggled. On this island, he is the apex predator. The skull crawlers can't touch him. Like even in Kong Skull Island, they tell you he was a borderline baby at the time and he was killing skull crawlers. So it's like, why is this a threat? It doesn't make much sense, but you basically have in this, like I said, you have the two motivations. Kong won't bow to anyone, you're told. He won't listen to any other apex. To him, he is the head honcho, whatever, the king in this case. And Godzilla will not allow for another apex predator. And so he is in conflict like that. And their explanation essentially is we want to get to the human characters, which are very, like in every one of these films, the human characters are very small parts, very tiny, obnoxious parts. But it felt like even in this film, they reduced them further. And
honestly, I'm okay. I'm like, just give me fighting and take away everything else, because the storyline that you've showed me in 1 and 2 didn't catch my interest enough. I mean, God, we were talking yesterday about some of the lines in King of the Monsters, and it's
bad.
brutal to listen to the dialogue they've come up with. I'm like, just please go back to fighting and don't pretend like you have a story to tell me.
Yeah,
I don't need to hear it. Just have monsters. I want Pacific Rim. I mean, you're copying it anyway in this one. And if anyone's going to tell me this is not like borderline, like dangerous copyright infringement, you're wrong, because it looks exactly like Pacific
Well, that's
Rim.
because it is the same universe is the thing. Like it's legendary for both. And there have been many talks of doing a Godzilla Pacific Rim crossover.
Oh God, I would pay some. I would just literally, if they were like, tickets are $1,000, I'd be like, yeah, what? Is it your Venmo? I'd like to buy it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's an interesting concept that's been floating out there for a while, but I don't know if there's actually going to be movement on making it. I think they're trying to resuscitate the Pacific Rim franchise, but if you want to do it, that would probably be the way to do it. Go ahead and print money. But
and bring back Charlie Hunnam and get rid of the second trash movie that came. I don't even understand the first movie, because I'm like, I try to explain it to people and I was like, I don't know. It's the best, worst movie I've ever seen, because the dialogue's garbage, but they know it's garbage. So they're like trying to be funny with how bad it is. Mm-hmm. But then the fight scenes are just like one shot, no pan offs. And you're just like, dear God, why can't
Guillermo del Toro at the helm there?
It's literally like he took the exact opposite advice that Michael Bay took. Rather than 9,000 scene cuts in a 10-second period, he's like, oh no, I'm just gonna hold this as long as possible until we have to move, which is exactly what everyone wants to see. I get why they don't do it, because it's a lot easier to show random things that don't mean anything, and you're confused and you think that there's action. So feed the masses, but you're not making a good product.
Yeah, for sure. Confused is a good word to tie back to this film, because the plot is pretty nonsensical. You have literally I guess you would say just a full retcon, totally unexplained. The eco-terrorist group that has the Ghidorah head at the end of the second film, King of the Monsters, they're not in it. The main eco-terrorist villain, whose name is so generic white guy, I forgot it. It might as well have been like Sean Johnson or something like that. He's not in the film.
And was there ever a tie-in to them being related to Apex? I mean, no. That's something I was wondering about, because in the after credits you see, hey, we're going to buy this head, and then we've got a head in the next one, so I'm assuming it's the same head. But
it's the same head, because Godzilla destroyed the other two, and in fact Ghidorah grew back a head, so like the head there is like an extra Ghidorah head or whatever. But what's weird is there's not an explanation, and it's like there's a disconnect to me how it goes from like the eco-terrorists, they're bad people. Obviously in the second film they're willing to literally try and extinct mankind to correct the balance of nature and everything in their eyes via the Titans, and yet it's like, so you sold the head to a multi-billion-dollar corporation for the sake of making a robot kaiju? Like, I feel like you're in conflict with your own values, you know what I mean? You can't just be like, he's bad and he's bad, so they're working together, like they're bad together. I didn't like that change. I thought you needed to at least have a brief appearance from that guy, maybe something where the head is taken by force or something from him. He's double crossed, that little bridge probably would have at least tied it up where you're like, oh, okay, fine. Probably should have been the first scene of the movie, honestly, was something about how the head exchanged hands, essentially.
I was reading up on that too, and they said, I think it was the director, and he was like, in between the last Godzilla movie and this Godzilla movie, you just kind of have to assume that Godzilla probably stepped on him. And I was like, any sort of exposition there would have been just fantastic, except I got nothing, and I just felt like, especially with such a great casting, you're like, oh man, I want that guy back. And then we get this just weak duo of nothingness. I didn't think they bring anything to that role. They're not a villain I care about.
No, and I couldn't even tell you their names. Like the guy who runs Apex and his daughter or whatever, who she didn't even need to be his daughter, because like there's no acknowledgement there. There's just like the one point where he says like, oh, my daughter won't fail, and I was like, she could have been your secretary. I'm like, she could have been
a random person on the street.
I would have been like, okay, fine, sure. I know who you're talking about. You don't have to say my daughter for me to know who you're talking about. Just the weird things like that. But the idea is that they have to go to the Hollow Earth. So I'm like, okay, we're finally going to explore Hollow Earth. We've talked about it in the second film. First film didn't mention it, but it was this interesting theory that they had for how Godzilla fast traveled around the world. And I was like, okay, that could be interesting. An underwater cave tunnel system, like, okay, I'm interested. And we had Atlantis in the last film, not said as Atlantis, but strongly suggested.
Very much, like,
and it was there for 5 minutes and then it was blown up. But you're like, okay, well, that's interesting. Like there's a whole world down there and it's in these cave tunnels. But then like the Hollow Earth is just like another world. And there's like a point of like zero gravity where it's like you pass through this portal and it basically all gravity. They say it in the film. It's like the gravitational pull of a planet reverses in an instant. I'm like, oh, so anything would die. Doesn't matter if it's Kong jumping through and his race came from there, his species came from there. He's going to be torn apart, just like we're told the main guy, Skarsgård, the actor, his brother, we're told, died doing that.
Yeah, I think we're having to take the nuke logic on this and just that, for some reason
Just
this doesn't hurt them.
Yeah.
Because reasons. Because it's in the script. That's why.
Exactly. Because we're told like, oh no, and it's fine because we've devised these ships that can handle that. How? What do you mean? How do you know they can handle that? They're good for like space travel, but that's a very different effect.
Yeah, I'd love to see how you test
it. You can't shoot a submarine into space and everything just be fine as is. You know what I mean? Like it's a different like physics, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, they're like, hey, they glow with electricity. Obviously, they're going to work. I'm like, I want just a little bit, just something like, hey, we tested this by doing this, or even if they were like, hey, we've already done it. We've killed 30 other people trying to build their ship. Like, great, thank you. Now I'm buying it a little bit more than whatever just throwaway garbage you told me, and I'm supposed to believe that this works now. But okay, sure.
So while this is going on, we essentially have a situation where Godzilla senses something's wrong. He's sensing that there's another apex predator out there. By the way, he's sensing Mechagodzilla, we find out, because he attacks Pensacola, which is where the U.S. base of this apex technologies is. And he kills dozens of people, just literally atomic breathing the place itself, destroys the apex building. The core or brain, whatever it is, of Mechagodzilla is literally exposed in the open air. And Godzilla just walks away. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You sensed it enough to come here. You sensed it enough to target the building. And now that it's exposed and in the open and the signal should be stronger than ever, you're like, my job is done here. Like,
so do you think it was the eye? Okay, this is the eye.
One of the eyes? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm taking out of it. And I've heard some things saying like maybe it's part of the orca and that's how they're controlling Ghidorah's head.
Is it the eye or is it the laser at the back of his mouth? Because that would put off power that Godzilla would sense. An eye doesn't seem like it should put off power that he would sense.
See, I thought more about it after we talked about it, and I don't think he's detecting that at all. I think that's what we see, and we see that there's a hole ripped in the building, which kind of leads us to believe like maybe that's the power source that he's sensing. I don't think it's that at all. I think the head is plugged in, or at least they tested it maybe. Gotcha. So maybe they've got the head and they're testing out the unit, the thing that goes over the guy's head. So maybe they booted it up and then right then Godzilla is coming for him, and maybe they're still testing. Maybe they don't know. And maybe they shut it off. Gotcha. And that's why he leaves because
they're on the rooftop. Yeah. They're on the rooftop.
And I would assume it's got to have some sort of power source that's, removed from it because something is obviously creating, whatever helps this. I've heard that there's, I guess they were saying that since Ghidorah is able to speak telepathically, that's how the robot's working. But they didn't really it's like, wires that are colored. Okay, explain to me how this is working. Right. You're going to skip it because you don't have logic for anything in this movie. But fine, it's whatever. Just fight some monsters. That's all right.
Yeah. Well, that makes some sense about like the Ghidorah head, not the eye or the laser mouth, whatever. But it's an immediate thing. Like Godzilla's rampaging around, and multiple times he goes landside and is just killing people. Like,
he doesn't give a shit.
If planes are shooting at him, he's swatting them out of the air, and it's like, that's a drastic change from what we saw in the first two films. Hell, the first film ends with like the lamest, cheesiest news broadcast ever, where it's like Godzilla, savior of San Francisco, friend to mankind. Like that's the headline. And I was just like, I remember seeing that in the theater, and I was like, no one wants that. No news channel would put that out there. Like people wouldn't be saying that. They'd be like, dude, these monsters just fought, and one of them like killed these other two. Like they wouldn't be like, he saved us. Like who would be there to have witnessed him saving anything? It's just like, hey, these monsters fought and this one lived. Oh, good. He left. He didn't kill us. That was good. That would be the story. But like,
well, they spend the whole first movie where it's just, it's literally a tease of when can we see Godzilla? And it's like, oh my gosh, if you cut scene one more time, Now, mind you, I can't remember the guy who directed the first one. I believe it was the same guy who did Monsters, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
It's not?
No. They changed directors. It's the Monsters, and this one, and Godzilla vs. King Kong was versus Kong was Adam Wingard. The first film was Edward something.
Was it supposed to be the guy who did? I heard something about this a while back.
I
obviously need to read IMDb before I jump on this call with you.
It's fine. I just know that they didn't retain the guy that did the original. But yeah, in his style, the first film is very much less is more. And what I will say for the series, it did always take crowd reaction and response into consideration. Like the first film, they tried a less is more approach. They tried to, everything was in dark. It's covered in smoke and rain. Like they never give you really good, satisfying looks at the monsters until the final fight. And even then it's still in dark and you still have like dust and ash and stuff like that. And it's obscured, but goddamn, did they build up the best atomic breath charge. Like
so good.
People in the theater in the 2014 film were cheering when it just starts like the like it's such a slow build, but it's awesome. It's like this great moment, even though compared to the other films, one, it's a much slower build, like as he's charging it up in that film. Two, it's he starts to spam it like crazy. And in this film, it's ridiculous how much he uses it. I mean, it's basically just like, it's obscene. But
never runs out for some reason. Okay, sorry, I was a little confused. Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
I was going to say, so they had that feedback from the first movie. Then in King of the Monsters, they're like, oh, you want more monsters? You want them fighting more? Okay, we're going to give you full frame monsters. That's why you have like the wide shot of like Antarctica, Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. You get more action of them fighting. You get a lot more monsters, and you get full frame action with less cutaways. But it is still obscured in a lot of darkness and a lot of thunderstorms and rain. And so this one, they go, oh, okay, you want daytime fights? Here you go. Here they are on a ship carrier. Like they're taking the feedback into consideration, with the exception of the actual script. Like the script is getting lame.
Oh yeah.
Each film, and it feels less effort is being put into it. And it's like, well, look, I mean, as far as the aesthetics, we're giving you exactly what you wanted. You thought Godzilla was too chunk in the first one, so we made him a little slimmer in the second one, made him a little slimmer again in the third one. You wanted us to show that we knew and appreciated the lore of Godzilla. We brought in things like the Oxygen Destroyer and Burning Godzilla in the second one. Oh, you didn't like that either? All right, well, here's fucking King Kong. At some point, you're going to like what we're doing. Like, we've given you Ghidorah. We've given you King Kong. We fucking gave you, and this is not even a spoiler at this point because of when it came out, man, we've already referenced it. We'll give you fucking Mecha Godzilla. Never mind, it's the worst fucking looking Mecha Godzilla ever. It is the most trash looking Mecha Godzilla ever. And one thing that drives me nuts about this film, the whole point is we're trying to get to the Hollow Earth, because Godzilla's rampaging, we don't know why. And Kong is our only hope for humanity. Kong is literally built up as the protagonist of this film. And the Skull Island cast gets top billing and top focus over the Godzilla cast in Godzilla. And I'm like, that's a really weird thing, because Godzilla's top billing here. So it's weird that like Millie Bobby Brown and Monarch and her dad and everything are such background noise. It's like they're not even there. You could edit them out of this film and lose nothing. Like, would you lose anything? Yeah. Is there any plot development that you would lose?
Gosh, we'll get into their final, Mecha Godzilla win in the dumbest way ever, which just, upset me to my core. But no, they provide nothing. It's just, hey, we can't put Godzilla and Kong in a fight for 2 hours and keep everybody engaged in that, because we don't know what to do with 2 hours of fight scene. So we got to put a little bit of stuff in here, and that was plot. They're trying to talk to the guy who's on his little podcast and works for Apex. I get that there's a story there, but they really did nothing with it. Her dad is in it for, this sentence lasted longer than he's in the movie.
Yeah.
Which I also think it's funny that I think people are probably noticed it more now, but I remember the old like Naomi Watts King Kong, and he was one of the dudes in it.
Yeah.
He's like swinging from a vine like an idiot. So there's obviously something that draws this guy to Godzilla and Kong directors for some reason, but I don't know what it is. I mean, he's all right.
Yeah. No, it's ridiculous how much Monarch is like an afterthought in this. Like they mean nothing. And it's like, I get that Serizawa like died in the second one, but I don't know. You're like, man, the whole Monarch operation kind of fell apart. Like if there was ever a time it should be more valuable than ever and have more power than ever, they're kind of nothing. They're running like a refugee camp where in Pensacola, where Godzilla attacked at the start of the film. And after that, they're just like, King Kong and Godzilla show up in Hong Kong later, and they're just like, what the hell's that thing? When like Mecha Godzilla comes out, and it's just like, yeah, that's about your involvement in this film. Like he's in it for 2 minutes, like you said, and it's trailer speak. His lines in the trailer is about it. Like, Godzilla's out there and he's hurting people and we don't know why. That's the whole, that line delivery is why he's in this film. And
it just needed something to explain the behavior shift. As we were talking about earlier, okay, I think I was right. The first Godzilla was the same guy who did Monsters, right? And then they switched directors in the second one. Yeah, I think
Adam Wingard did both this one and King of the Monsters. I'm pretty sure they switched directors. Gareth Edwards was the original director. I can look that up
of the very first one
of 2014.
Just Godzilla.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so he took the exact same approach that he did with Monsters, whereas he tried to build his characters, which I mean he didn't have much to work with there, and slow build to the final scene of the monster, and that's what he did. But the problem is we already knew what Godzilla was, and he set him up. Godzilla's the good guy for sure. You don't see Godzilla stomp on anyone. You don't see him kill anyone.
No.
The second movie does the same. I mean, the most we see is this, Millie Bobby Brown's dad screaming with the mom and her.
Yeah, or you hear the brother died or something, the kid brother.
Yeah, which I'm going to just make the assumption that Godzilla was behind it. And that's why he has so much hate is maybe he crashed into a building. But he wasn't doing it intentionally, or at least we're not made to believe that. And then this one, he just goes nuts. He's just psycho Godzilla now, which I love. I want that. I want the anti-hero. Like he doesn't care about us. So, I mean, I want more of that. It's just like, you can't set up Godzilla as being like, oh, I am a sweet, good, loving monster. And now I hate you, which they hinted at, but
yeah, I think the only reason that could kind of work is the only way you could explain a shift like that is if multiple things, like there is something severely wrong. And I think in this case, between them moving Kong and him being aware of that, between him sensing the Ghidorah head, maybe he even recognizes it's like the Ghidorah like energy, if you will. Like, I don't know if he's like aware of like not just because like is it that much further of a reach to say like, look, if he can sense somewhere out there in the world is another apex predator, another apex titan, like is it a reach to say like once he's encountered one, he's like, Kong's not on his island or something like that? Like,
and why does Godzilla have it and Kong doesn't? I mean, like if there's this whole big battle with who wants to be the crybaby about being the best of the best, I mean, why does Godzilla sense him all the way across the world? And King Kong, I mean, we don't really get any hint that he senses Godzilla until Godzilla is pretty much
already charging down on him. Yeah.
Yeah. So does he have some special power? I mean, it's radiation, obviously.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. It could just be one of those instinctive things. Godzilla is also a much older being than this King Kong. Obviously, like I said, in Skull Island, King Kong, this one was basically a borderline baby, like an adolescent. Godzilla's been around since the 50s, at least. The 2014 movie showed them nuking him at the beginning. And so you have those things to work off of. But I think that if you have the explanation that he's so thrown off, it's like his instincts and his Godzilla testosterone, if you will, is cranked up to 11. They keep talking about like, why would he flash a dominance display or something like that? or an intimidation display. That's what they say. If there's not something wrong, if he's not sensing a threat. And I think it's just that he is so on edge that even the people like shooting missiles at him and stuff, he's just like, all right, screw you too. Like, I don't care about you. Yep. Like, whatever. I don't like the idea of like Godzilla, defender of Earth. I like when I like it when he's the threat, or at the very least, he's just like, dude, I just want to fight the other kaiju. Like the Heisei era in Japan, which is like 1984 to 1995, gets it right. Godzilla is either the threat, or he'll go and he'll wreck a monster, but then he's like, you know what, while I'm here, let me blow up a few buildings in Japan before I walk out. Let me blow up Tokyo.
And leave a mark.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, dude, that's how a monster would walk this line. He wouldn't just be like, all right, you're safe now. Let me walk you across the street. It'll be like a quarter of a step. But let's help you across the street, and then I'll give you a little kiss on the head, and I'll tuck you in, and we'll go. We'll
good
go
night.
to the next movie. Exactly. So this one, I thought I liked the persona, but like you said, it's not explained well why he would just have a 180, and the only reason that you can have this movie is if there's a 180. Because I was afraid they were going to go the Batman v Superman route, and they kind of almost do. Like literally, even at the very end of the movie, you could say it's rounding into form of like the "you're killing Mothra" kind of joke there. Why did you say that name? Like you could say it's almost rounding back into that form. But there's a problem with it because we've established that their goals are at odds with one another. Godzilla will not allow any other predator to be like the apex predator. He has to be the top and the dominant one. That's why he literally not only killed the two Mutos, he was trying to destroy their like nest and everything in that regard. Yep. Plus the Mutos had nearly hunted his species into extinction. As we saw, there was a Godzilla carcass in the beginning of the first 2014 one. And then obviously with the Ghidorah head, that was another existential threat that he was like, I'm going to eat your last head and then atomic breath through the back of your skull. Just brutal shit. So you're like, oh, wow. So he's not going to hold back at all when it comes to beating Kong, right? No, he's actually going to take a different route, which it's an abandonment of his goal and motive, which feels like they're just like, we can't have like a fatality result. And so we have to like shift it. But it's like by shifting it, it's like he won the fight, but he abandoned his goal, whereas Kong didn't yield. Kong was still challenging him, like basically like, do it. And Godzilla's just like,
Yeah, when he's screaming in his face and then Kong screams back. It's like, okay, that's not him submit. I mean, he's definitely lost the fight.
Yeah.
But he's too stubborn to give up. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing I don't understand too. So we got to shift back to the last movie again. At the end of the last movie, Ghidorah's dead. All the monsters are there. They bow down to him. What happens to them?
Yeah, nothing.
There's nothing said about this. Did they go back to their home?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. They don't have an explanation for it. And I actually was willing to say, hey, if we're willing to go like full Godzilla heel turn here, why not have him in this whole thing? Be like, you know what? I'm commanding all of these monsters. Apparently they didn't bend the knee to Godzilla before, right? Because they weren't listening to him before. Ghidorah is who released them essentially. And so it's like, all right, well, if he's the king of the monsters at the end, if he's going full heel turn, then in this movie, how epic would it have been? It would have been an even further character turn, like you talked about. But if he had basically sicked the monsters on the world like Ghidorah did. So like imagine that. Like imagine King Kong, since they're already making him to be the protagonist, he's trying to get to where Godzilla is. And Godzilla is throwing basically kaiju at these different cities, or like trying to slow Kong, like whatever, like basically doing the mustache twirling villain thing.
Yeah.
It would be weird, but it also would be setting up then for King Kong to get completely over, so to speak. Like that's like a term in wrestling, is like, how do you get a guy over? Oh, you have him, beat up a bunch of other guys, like win all these fights. And how do you bury a guy? Oh, you have him take an embarrassing loss. Godzilla, if he throws multiple kaiju at King Kong beats all of them, and then still, even in a weakened condition, beats Godzilla. That's how you bury Godzilla, and suddenly he doesn't look strong anymore. He looks like a little bitch.
Yeah.
And this movie kind of gives us such inconsistency with this, because they say 3 rounds, it's 2 fights. And the first one we talked about on the helicarrier, Godzilla destroys Kong, but it's not a fair fight. Kong is, for the first couple minutes of it, chained to the deck. And so when Godzilla flips the ship, Kong's immediately nearly drowning.
Yeah, literally the most unfair fight ever. I mean, he has no chance.
And
but
Godzilla
I mean,
doesn't give a
does
shit.
Godzilla care?
No.
It's like, he's like, I just want to kill him. I don't, you know, hands tied behind his back, doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. And on top of that, Kong's been sedated. Like for 4 days, I think they said. Like he's
got like the neck thing on, right?
Yeah. He's been under at least mild sedation for 4 days to keep him even temperament. And so it's like, not only does he start out the fight nearly drowned, not only does he have to deal with being sedated, but he's fighting Godzilla on Godzilla's strongest turf, which is completely one-sided. And the dumbest part of the fight, aside from what we talked about, the missiles hurting Godzilla, the depth charges making him let go of drowning Kong, is when Kong gets back out of the water after the depth charges, he basically flops over on his back, pukes up a bunch of water. And then they're like, oh, turn off the engines. Godzilla will think he's won. And Godzilla rises up.
Why do the engines matter?
Yeah, they're like, oh, he'll take it as like a challenge or something. And if we turn off the engines, he'll leave. And I'm like, but his goal is to kill Kong. And he literally rises up out of the water, stares at Kong, and he's like, meh, and then just leaves. And I'm like, what?
It's kind of like, got him. He's done.
But it doesn't make sense. Like it makes no sense. It's so dumb, and it's just like they didn't know how to end that scene with, when they didn't know how to win that scene without Kong literally dying. And so there's like, I don't know, Godzilla's stupid and just lets him live or leaves. Like that's what they were essentially going for in that case. And then round 2, which, even before they go to round 2, they eventually take Kong in. They go into the Hollow Earth. You find like the ruins of a Kong civilization, including this battle axe, which is again another thing they have to make up for Kong. The legendary films had to make Kong much bigger as well to make him equal in size to Godzilla. But now we have to create a mythical weapon for him to be able to fight Godzilla, because you can't beat atomic breath. And so they're like, the axe part is like a Godzilla dorsal fin, so it holds this radiation. And being the Kong kingdom was at the like hollow earth core, it's like supercharged. And I think they said like in the extended stuff, like the bone handle is like a Muto bone, which I don't know how that really adds to the power.
We throw away, no one would have noticed.
Yeah, I
mean, somebody there that like Larry's like, hey, I've been rendering this for the last 16 hours. And they're like, fine, Larry, put in the stupid Muto bone.
Yeah.
Like, no one cares, but sure. I mean, since you've already done the work. Now, what I saw when I was watching the movie last, and I didn't get a super clear shot, but it looked to me like there were a lot of axes like in the circle. And maybe it just looked that way. And maybe it was, just dorsal fins. But I mean, I was thinking there were multiple axes. There was only one that was like kind of sitting up for him to grab.
I mean, it kind of makes sense if you think about it in terms of like, if this is an ancient war, which they tell us, and that's just throwaway exposition for why they hate each other, which doesn't even matter because Godzilla's goal enough would put them into odds with fighting each other. But it's like, okay, so if you kill the Godzilla, you have a lot of dorsal fins to do for this.
Which are the most powerful creation on Earth. Is there some dorsal fins thing in the past movies where they're like, oh, you could kill Godzilla, but you can't destroy a dorsal fin?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I don't think the dorsal fins. Now, if you go with like Shin Godzilla, they expanded that where the dorsal fins had a lot more power and were more dynamic. But like in the other Godzilla films, I don't think the dorsal fins did it. Like I wouldn't have assumed a dorsal fin would hold the radiation like it does. At the end, when Godzilla supercharges it, sure. Or when it's obviously connected to him and he charges it, sure. But the fact that this thing's been down here for centuries.
and it chooses when and when not to glow also, which drove me insane. I'm like, why is it not glowing right now? Now it's glowing. It's like it glows when you pick it up. That doesn't make any sense. But
yeah,
okay.
And it's not like Kong radiates the energy to match it.
Yeah,
They,
it's
like,
not coming from him.
harmonize.
It's like he's got a little button. He's like, I got to turn my lightsaber on. Give me just a second.
Yeah, I got to make people know that it's about to be powerful versus just a prop.
Gonna hit him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Godzilla, the second Kong activates the power source, which itself is like a light that's like a display of Godzilla, a Godzilla thing. Godzilla like senses Kong is down there. I don't know that he senses it's Kong. He senses the power source is being activated. And he does the most bizarre thing, because even for how the movie shows us you can get to the Hollow Earth, it makes no sense. And this is like, if you're Godzilla and you think you're engaging in a fight, this is the dumbest strategy to employ. He literally just atomic breaths to the fucking core of the planet. And I'm like,
amazing accuracy, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I'm like,
you could not be even the slightest bit off and get anywhere close to him. And somehow he hits them almost dead on.
Yeah. It's like, dude, it's a good thing that was directly under Hong Kong, apparently. Like, I know it's not like under everything, but yeah, like the Hollow Earth is like its own world. It has like, it still looks like it has a sun.
Oh gosh, can we talk about the sun, please? That's all I've been wanting to talk about.
See, I thought maybe that's the actual core itself, but then like you have the wonky gravity where it's like you have land under you and above you, and the sun thing sort of floats in the middle. The Hollow Earth makes no sense. Because again, we're told like, oh, that's how Godzilla fast travels. And yet you're looking at it and you're like, there's no fucking way you fast travel through this shit. Even if he knows other entrance points humans don't know, this is not convenient.
Like, it's definitely not a means of transportation. I mean, gosh, I don't know. Maybe there's some way to make it faster, but I can't assume it's ever going to help him that much. Maybe if you're getting to the exact opposite side of the world, there's some benefit there, but that just the sun really thing was driving me crazy. I was like, and I got to the same conclusion as you. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be in the boat where I say this is the core. Why is it floating in midair? I'm not really sure. Why is it working exactly like it? There's so many questions. The lighting is beautiful and perfect everywhere also, which doesn't make sense because there would be a huge shadow over everything.
Think about gravity, the temperature too.
Yeah, the temperature is, I mean, it's beautiful. The weather's perfect, but
no, the humans aren't even sweating.
There's so many questions. So many questions. The gravity, I get where they were going with it, because they're saying like, oh, gravity is all based on a center. So, when we'll say the core is the center. So if I'm going up and I'm going down, my gravity is going to be shifted. So that's what I saw that they were doing. But that makes me even more confused with the little wormhole thing. Yeah.
And so speaking of the wormhole, Godzilla's atomic breath, not only the amount of energy it would take to atomic breath to the core of the planet, draining all of the energy he would have for whatever fight was coming. But what about the wormhole? Shouldn't that have because we saw when they broke through it, it was almost like they had to tear through it. Like it was like Looney Tunes going through like a piece of plastic. And it's like, how far will it stretch before it tears? Yeah. And so I was like, shouldn't his beam, especially after cutting that far to the core, reverse? Shouldn't it be rebuffed in some kind of way?
Yeah, for a second, I was like, are we watching Interstellar now? Because I feel like something really strange just happened and we just kind of glossed over that. Also, the ship is going through this, it's pulling apart as far as it can. There are rocks everywhere. I mean, if you just realistically, the ship goes through that thing, gets shot straight into a rock, and they're dead. Yep. That's how that would work in real life, but it's a movie, so everything works out just the way you want it to.
Yeah.
The thruster is always activated at the last minute, and you're able to get back up to the top. So I would love it if they just, one day just kill a whole cast, and you're like, wow, we're not even halfway through the movie. That's a really bold choice, but
I guess we got to find a new movie.
Yeah, we got to figure out what else to do with this at this point.
Start following this random group over here in this part of the city now.
I'd love to see it. I'd pay money for it for sure. Yeah.
But so Godzilla destroys this Kong kingdom or whatever you want to call it in the Hollow Earth. Kong's pissed off because it's the only thing of his people he's ever scene, essentially.
Yep.
And so Kong, again, where's the wormhole? Kong literally climbs from the core of the planet through it. And I'm like, how big of a hole did Godzilla make? Not just deep of a hole, but that Kong is like climbing through it without like having to like squirm and wiggle, you know?
Yeah. How long do we think it takes to get to the center of Earth? Because I can tell you, it's not like a quick little climb. Like, it's still night when he gets up there. There is no way.
It's like minutes later.
You know how long it
Godzilla's
takes
like 4
you to
buildings
walk
away.
somewhere? I mean, they're huge, but they're not that huge. Like, they're still not making a big dent as far as the size of the Earth. So he's not just climbing up there super speed, unless the wormhole just shoots him out. And
without the gravity reversal thing, there's nothing to propel him out either. Like, if he had flung out into the air, I would have been like, okay, well, I guess I could buy that. Like, that he jumped into it and it essentially reversed gravity, like catapulted him to the surface.
Yep.
Fine. But no, he literally climbs. No. And so then we get Godzilla and Kong round 2, and it's the second fight of the film, and yet they treat it like it's a separate thing. Kong obviously in the city, Hong Kong, the lighting is awesome.
Pacific Rim.
Cool.
It's straight. Yeah, the second I saw the lighting, I was like, wonder where we got this from. But I mean, it's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah.
And the cuts are not always needed, but they're never detracting.
Yeah.
So, when we're looking at the monster fight, if we get a cut, it's really just like a quick transition to where we're at in the fight now, which I'm like, if you're going to do it in a way that makes sense, which that's it. As long as you're not giving me these ridiculous close-ups, I'm still in for it. It doesn't have to be one long take. I think everything they did with the fight scene still looked absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it was well done. And so in this fight, Kong is much more in his element. He's jumping off skyscrapers. He's moving with agility that Godzilla can't match. He's beating the shit out of Godzilla. They recreate the stuffing a tree in Godzilla's mouth thing from the original, but he does it with the hilt of the axe to block the atomic breath. Godzilla gets pissed and just starts spamming the shit out of his atomic breath, like to an embarrassing degree. That's like another thing. Like the first film, he didn't do it until like the last 5 minutes. The second film, he does it more, but it's still like 4 or 5 times. And it's like a desperation measure because he's just like, I can't fight Ghidorah head on. I have to like use this. And then in this film, he's just like, screw it. I'm just going to do it into infinity. And I'm like, so it's a rematch. You just drilled down to the core of the earth, just like not only is Kong in the home field advantage now, but you just expended, I gotta think, a large chunk of your power.
There's no way. There's no way you can literally get that thing to the center of the earth. I mean, he's just been sitting there for like 45 minutes, just like, man, this is ridiculous. But okay, I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
But in the last one, I mean, we even focus on like, hey, no, he's in bad shape. He needs to recharge.
Yeah.
I never see Godzilla eat. I have no idea how he's getting energy. I get the radiation thing, but you can't just be like, no, he can just shoot this atomic breath forever and nothing needs to recharge. He's just, he's got all the cheat codes. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense at all. And what got me is like when Kong, the film goes as far as to tell you, oh, it looks like Kong won round 2. It's like Godzilla does the dumbest thing imaginable. Kong is fighting him with the axe the whole time, whether it was stuffing it down his gullet, whether it was stabbing him in the leg with it. Godzilla is aware this is a dorsal fin. And yet when Kong jumps to deliver the axe handle slam on him, he's like, I'm going to focus my atomic breath on the axe itself. Like, dude, lower your chin and you'll blast him in the face and he's dead. Like this is an easy fight, but like they do the dramatic slow-mo, again, the trailer shot where he's just charging the axe up more and more. And then Kong lowers the boom, huge shockwave, and Godzilla falls down. Kong falls back, but gets up. And then that's when they're telling you like to the camera, like, oh, it looks like Kong wins round 2. And I was like, we're still in the same fight, right? Like the first one was definitively a separate fight. So it's like, if Kong won round 2, Godzilla already won the first fight. So it's like, it's not equal, I guess. But like they get back up and just resume fighting in the same setting immediately. So I'm like, why are we saying he won round 2? We're still in the same fight. And then that's when Godzilla basically is completely pissed off and goes about basically effing up Kong, like just goes full primal where he's dead sprint. Dead sprint Godzilla is a horrifying sight. He's raking at Kong's chest. Kong dislocates his shoulder. Godzilla finally pops him in the back with the atomic breath. Like
I like when he's nipping at his feet too.
Oh yeah, he's like biting his toes.
I'm just gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Yeah, he's just like a rabid animal. It's just like, oh god. And then
so many people are dying when this is happening too. I mean, we're totally focused on the monsters, but I'm like, you are killing thousands upon thousands of people. Like everyone in Tokyo is dying right now.
Yeah. And so Godzilla pins him, pushes down on his chest with his foot, screams in his face, and it's basically like telling him like yield. And Kong roars back saying no. And then Godzilla walks away. He's just like, eh. And here's how you fix this. Because while all this is going on, our B story is that the Ghidorah head, after the power source was extracted via fucking cloud technology or some shit from the core, that was the thing that, like, watching that, I literally paused the movie on first viewing. And I was just like, there's no fucking way they're telling me that they just uploaded that power source.
What's funny is when you mentioned that, I could not even remember what you were talking about at first until I rewatched it yesterday. And I was like, oh God, I totally forgot about that. Because I remember in the movie, I went to see it with my buddy Mitch, and we both kind of looked at each other at the same time. We're like, is that how power works? Because I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
Yeah, it's like they took like a little pebble's worth of the thing, and then it like this little robot like extracted it, and then it uploaded, and then the Ghidorah head just immediately like supercharged, and that was it. So the whole thing was they've been trying to power the Mechagodzilla thing because they think like, oh, this is how we'll win the fight against the kaiju, is having our own kaiju. But because it's powered by a Ghidorah head, trying to use the telepathy thing, and now it's got this power source. Now it's like infinite power, literally drawn from the core of the planet, just like Godzilla's radiation power comes from. And the Ghidorah head basically goes nuts, kills the pilot, which is the worst, most unnecessary thing. We talked about how necessary it was that the bad girl in the movie was the daughter of the apex bad guy, and he gets killed by the Mechagodzilla immediately once it goes rogue. And it's like, it doesn't matter, but like they use Serizawa's son as like the pilot of Mechagodzilla. And I couldn't help but wonder, like, why are you here? Why
have
you?
We done this? Why have we not even talked about this?
Why did we only create this? Yeah, we only created this character for this element, and then we didn't explore it. Like, did he hold a grudge against Godzilla for his father's death? Did he hate his father, and so his father loved Godzilla? He wants to kill Godzilla? Like, what is the story here? You don't know.
Yeah, I just figured it's like, okay, there's some estranged relationship here, which maybe there was a scene that got cut from the movie or something, but I'm like, no one cares about this. This is not building to anything. I don't like that character. He has almost no screen time. It's just that's like the Muto bone. No one is going to notice it. No. It's going to go completely wasted. And it's like, does it hurt that it's in the movie? Not necessarily. Would it make sense if we knew why we were focused on this character? If there was a little bit more motivation? Yeah, I would have appreciated that actually. So the fact that they just completely glossed over everything now.
But here's why I hate it. It's another example of this franchise not knowing how to actually work with like its world building, right? Like the Oxygen Destroyer and King of the Monsters. That's a huge fucking deal. That killed the original Godzilla in 1954. And they just throw it out there and they're like, oh, by the way, this is the Oxygen Destroyer. And it doesn't kill Godzilla.
And Serizawa originally created it.
Right.
And now it's just like the government did it.
That's what I was getting to, is the scientist that created it and then gave his life to make sure it never fell into the wrong hands, that the technology was never used again, was Dr. Serizawa. And so having one of his descendants doing the Mechagodzilla thing, you're like, that's interesting. That shows like, it's the lineage thing, but it can show how it's fallen from the tree and it's taking a very different approach. But they do nothing with it. And it's just like the Oxygen Destroyer. Like they showed a few fish float to the surface. I'm like, it's the fucking Oxygen Destroyer. Why aren't they bones? Why aren't they carcasses? Why are they fully living like scaled fish? And they're like, oh, well, it didn't hurt Ghidorah because he's from space.
He's an alien.
Oh. Yeah, they're like, oh, it destroys biomass as we know it here on Earth, and he's an alien. I'm like, is he fucking breathing oxygen? Because that's what it destroys. It should at very least destroy all the oxygen in the water in his lungs. He should fucking suffocate if nothing else. And they're like, oh, well, Godzilla's gravely injured. But then you see him and you're like, he just looks like he's fucking sleeping. He's not like, he should be like,
he's taking a nap. I think he's all right.
Like he should be like falling apart. He should literally be like half zombie Godzilla. Like so dumb, man. Like
the fact that they didn't stick with Serizawa's death in that way too. It's like the nuke thing. It's like, gosh, how many movies do I have to watch where it's like, oh, sorry, the freaking detonator's not working right now. You got to manually do it. I'm like, the oxygen has he literally kills himself as part of, I am never going to let this get out. This is the worst thing that's ever been created. I'm going to destroy all my research and I'm going to kill the only person that knows how to make it.
Yep.
That is an impact. Like that is amazing. And you just threw it in the trash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So stupid.
It's completely worthless. And then, like I said, killing him in this when the Ghidorah head goes rogue, stupid as well. Worthless.
Yep.
So in this fight, Godzilla beats Kong. And Kong won't submit, but Godzilla decides he's going to abandon his goal. Here, that's because he's abandoning his goal. It's effectively the Batman versus Superman thing after all, where it's like, Batman's like, oh, Superman's a threat to society. We can't let him live. If there's a 1% chance he could turn against us, we have to take that as an absolute certainty he will and kill him. What's that? His name was Martha? Oh, well, I abandoned my goal. Like, that's what this was. Godzilla's just like, oh, you won't yield to me? All right, well, whatever. Here's how you fix it.
Thanks for helping me out with the robot, though. I appreciate that.
Yeah, here's how you fix it. I'm just talking about the face-to-face roar off.
Oh, yes, that very much. I was like, dude, you don't just give up after. I would like at least spit in his face or something.
Yeah. Have Mechagodzilla wake up a second earlier. Have him laser out of the building a second earlier where Godzilla's charging up his beam, and as he's about to do it, the building blows up, the laser shoots out in the sky, and he stops and he looks over and he's like, oh, well, I've already won this fight, but that is what I've been sensing. Like, that's what I've been trying to find. And now I got to go deal with this. Here's another thing. If he sensed the activation of the Ghidorah head before, I guess you could say the distraction was his fight with Kong. But if he sensed it before, where he went all the way to Florida into that base.
Totally doesn't know anymore.
Why does he not know that the Ghidorah head activates and then the thing starts rampaging for a minute or two before he even sees it? Like, why is he not aware of it as he's like in this stare down with Kong? I don't know. Maybe it's distraction, but just having Mechagodzilla come out a second earlier avoids that, where you don't have that abandonment of his thing. He's just like, ooh, I got a bigger problem here. And because I can kind of feel that it's like Ghidorah, like I feel the same aura, if you will, I got to go deal with this. Makes perfect sense. That's so much better. Instead, they're like, Kong's heart is slowing down because Godzilla beat him that badly. And now we got to restart it with the fucking same ship, which is a Deus Ex Machina for a second time in this film. And then, it's fine. Kong will help him because the deaf girl that we created as a character for this film will tell him to. Well, you know what I mean? Like, there's just so many things like that I'm like, you could have done this better.
Yeah.
You didn't have to go to this route. You could just have it be where Mechagodzilla literally, like, don't do the whole thing where Kong's like dying. I know that Adam Wingard said he wanted to have a definitive winner because he was frustrated watching the original as a kid, that they don't give you a definitive winner. They both just lock up and tumble into the ocean. And then you see Kong swimming back to Skull Island. And they're like, oh, well, I guess Kong won. But it's like, but Godzilla lives in the ocean. Why would he come surface side if he's done fighting? Like, it was always basically a stalemate. In, if you want to say not a stalemate, fine, Kong won. But it's like, okay, so he gives you a definitive winner by Kong slowly dying and basically having to be resuscitated. But I don't think you even need that. Godzilla had already proven that he had won the fight, fighting Kong literally in his perfect element, even though Kong had a Deus Ex Machina battle axe specially designed to kill Godzilla. And if you just avoid the whole Kong heart stopping thing. Have Godzilla start fighting Mechagodzilla. Please give more than 30 seconds of that, because Godzilla's, if he was drained fighting Kong after drilling atomic breath to the core of the planet, he's got fuck all left for the fight at that point. Yeah. And so he's just getting his ass beat. And it's because these fights are never even footing. It's so hard to actually like judge or grade these kaiju against each other. But if you just have something like that where Godzilla and Mechagodzilla are fighting, Kong's just kind of like watching, confused, like he's still wounded, but he's just kind of watching, and then have Mechagodzilla literally attack him as well, just like, no, dude, I'm freaking killing everything. Then they can team up organically that way. And it doesn't have to be the little girl like, please, he's our friend, Godzilla's friend. That's your enemy. And I know she's deaf, so she's sign language, everything, but it's just like, you don't have to go this route, and you don't have to then do like, oh, restart his heart with what did they say? Like a power source that could like power Vegas for a week. Yeah, I think it said Vegas for like a week. And it's like, or so I get he's a giant monkey, but you mean like explode his heart?
Also, his heart is slowing down. Like it's not stopped. Yeah. He's legitimately dying. When your heart is slowing down, your heart, I would assume, is still active. The whole point of a shock to resuscitate you is to restart your heart. Yeah. His heart is literally broken. Like, it's not that it's not on, it's just not going to work anymore. So the fact that they're like electrical charge, I'm like, okay, whatever.
That's a good point.
I've dealt with the stupid nuke thing. So yeah, sure. Electricity makes sense, I guess. Cause script. So I completely agree with you. The Mechagodzilla right after the Kong fight would have been amazing, because when they are screaming at each other's face, I was like, I don't even remember what the next scene is, but I was just like, wait, what? No, that you don't stop. Like, you're there. Like, somebody, that's fatality moment. You know, your soul will be mine
to this point. And now that you have victory, just like in the water, you're like, I got what I wanted, I guess. Not really, but I'm just going to act like I did. Yeah. If you have them have to team up organically that way, then it makes more sense, I think. Or hell, have Mechagodzilla accidentally or not accidentally nearly kill your little sign language girl, the little deaf girl that Kong likes. Oh, well, now I have motive to attack you. You know, something like that. Something like that would make more sense. Instead, it's like talking to him like he's a person and trying to like, he's the bad one, you got to help Godzilla. And so they end up teaming together for a minute, and Mechagodzilla is in the movie like 5 minutes, maybe. I mean, not at all. They go through this fight. They team together for like 5 minutes. Mechagodzilla's got like 5 minutes in the film. You don't even see the majority of what he can do. And he's about to open Godzilla's mouth and do his super laser thing that split a skull crawler in half earlier in what was a pretty cool display of his power. But
why skull crawler too? Why is that the thing that they need to demo?
It's just another callback. It's just a callback. That's it. But so Kong saves Godzilla before he can be killed by Mechagodzilla, and then while they're fighting, then Kong's about to lose. He eventually gets his battle axe back, but he's still in danger of losing. Godzilla, seeing that he's holding the axe, atomic breaths the axe, charges up the dorsal fin, and now suddenly it cuts through Mechagodzilla like a fucking hot knife through butter. It is nothing to cut through him at this point, and I hated that as well, because I'm like, why? Because Godzilla's atomic breath was easily destroyed and like blown back by Mechagodzilla's beam. So like, why is a dorsal fin that basically just has like the glow and heat of, you know, that radiation, why is that suddenly like cutting through him like it's nothing? Movie logic, that's why. But he basically, Kong gets the kill on Mechagodzilla, 3 blows, and that's it. Just complete over. Kong basically drops to the ground like he's just completely spent. Godzilla basically stands up and is like, hey, we're going to have to fight again. And Kong drops the axe, like sort of his eventual bowing, I guess, even though he roared back at Godzilla earlier. Like, he basically says, like, I'm not going to fight you anymore. Like, I bend the knee for the slightest gesture I can make of that. And Godzilla's like, that's what I thought. And then he just walks back into the water. and that's it. Like that's the movie, and there's no post-credit scene, which I thought was weird. I don't know what
I read about that actually.
There was a deleted one, right?
The director said, I didn't want to go with the after credit scene because I felt like I was going to get, kind of stuck into something, which I think is very likely because it happens with a lot of directors is they'll make an after credit scene and then they're like, crap, I don't really want to go that direction with the next movie, but I have to either call back for that or completely ignore it and hope nobody gets mad.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? So this Legendary series, there initially were no plans to make more MonsterVerse movies after this one. This was the last one they had planned. And it's because the ratings of King of the Monster in terms of box office return were very low. And so they were trying to see if this could reinvigorate it. And it did. This was a huge smash hit, whether it was streaming it or box office compared to what else we were seeing in the pandemic. This was a huge success. So that was cool. And I'm sure they will make more, but it's like they need to go original now with the monster. Muto was original. It wasn't super inspired, but it was original. And the combination of it being a male and a female and them having their own different dynamics, I thought kind of gave it a little something that was interesting.
Yeah.
Then they went with Godzilla's biggest, baddest enemy in his rogue gallery, if you will, with King Ghidorah. It's like, oh shit, okay, you can't top King Ghidorah. Closest you could come is King Kong or Mecha God. Oh, look, the next movie. Like, you've used everything. Here's what I will say. If you're going to reuse another monster, go with, and this is like it's a personal favorite of mine, but it's a very interesting one. And it's one from the Heisei era. Go with Biollante, which that's actually an interesting one to me because that script was submitted by a fan for a contest and they liked it and they made it a movie, the second movie in the Heisei era. And it actually has, and don't be wrong, the movie's got its problems, but it's actually more ambitious than a lot of Godzilla movies in terms of its story it's trying to tell. Like it has to do kind of like the original in terms of like mankind meddling with science and trying to play God a little bit. And so there's interesting elements to it like that in this era, the Legendary universe here with the MonsterVerse, you could do a lot with that. So I would like to see them do that or go totally original, but I would need to see something that really delivers and is memorable. To me, the Muto were not memorable. They are there. They're there. There's even a Muto that is like among the Titans in King of the Monsters. And you're just like, oh, hey, it's that loser. Like it's just there. So I don't know. I think they're in kind of a tough spot now where it's like you have people clamoring for it, but you've used up all of your best weapons.
Yeah, what are you going to do?
Like
that's the thing is they kind of, it's not jumping the shark, but you definitely put all your cards on the table with the last one. You're like, you want monsters? Here's pretty much all of them.
Here's all the heavy hitters we can think of. The only heavy hitter they didn't have was Anguirus. They literally had Rodan. They had Mothra, Ghidorah. Like they played every big card that they realistically had. Unless you want to go with Destroya, which is, again, a Heisei one that connects back to the original Godzilla and is the death of the Heisei Godzilla. So interesting in that regard. But
have you seen if there's been any talks about where they plan to go from here?
I have not seen that. And I think they're still trying to figure it out because, like I said, they weren't sure if they were going to get another one. And Godzilla vs. Kong was like, and speaking of which, that one was also nearly remade in the Heisei era in the 90s, but it fell through. But they threw everything into this. And they're like, dude, if this can't do it, like Ghidorah couldn't save us. If this can't get our ratings going, like get our box office returns and all that, then the series is already dead.
Yeah.
And now it looks like they actually have managed to save the series, but it's like, okay, where do we go from here? Because we can't have them fight
Reboot.
Again. Yeah, we can't have them fight again. Ghidorah's gone. We don't want to go. We're not going to rehash immediately with Mecha Godzilla. You can't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where they go from here. They have to go original, or if they are going to borrow another monster, it needs to be something really unique that's going to provide a different type of fight and movie than what you've gotten in the first, certainly the last two, but really the entire series to this point.
Speaking of Mechagodzilla, there was a scene that I was watching yesterday. So when we were talking about when King Kong, kills Mechagodzilla, starts tearing him apart, and he's got all the oil dripping out of him. I was like, God, that is such a perfect comedy moment to throw in here. If you had him rip the head off and then do his little drinking, and then he just realizes it's all oil and just spits it. I was like, dude, that would have been hilarious and not take away from the character, because you wouldn't assume like, oh, he obviously knows that's a machine and it's not a. It's like it would have been so funny, and I wish they would have done it.
I thought they were going to go that way, because it was a callback to the snake dragon thing he killed in the Hollow Earth, and that
it was right there. It was right there, and they didn't do it.
Yeah, they just had him like hold it up, and I'm like, oh, they're gonna no, okay. I agree. That would have been a nice little touch at that point to cap it off, but yeah, I don't know. I'm very curious to see where they go from here, because they've played every major card they have. And it's like, okay, we might have saved it and that's great for profit, but now we don't know where to go, because if Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla, and King Kong could only draw this much for us, and that's why I think they should have saved Mechagodzilla, because in Japan, in the Showa era did it too. Showa era had Mechagodzilla at one point, like basically wearing a Godzilla like skin, like disguise, and just was fucking up other kaiju that Godzilla actually had like alliances with.
And didn't we talk about, or I think there was some discussion that that's kind of where everyone thought this movie was going to go.
Yeah. So the first time I watched the film, I kind of went in with the mindset of I'm going to just turn my brain off, because in King of the Monsters, I was very, very critical of a lot of things, and it really affected my ability to just enjoy that film. Like, I saw the fan service, but it irritated me because I didn't feel like they were giving it its proper like weight and respect, if that makes sense. It was just throwaway stuff like, see, we know what we're talking about. We know. And it just annoyed me because of that. And this film, it still had those moments, but I went in just like, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy it. If I get giant atomic death breathing lizard against giant monkey, I'm going to have fun. And it was on the rewatch where I was like, okay, I'm going to be a little more critical this time. And then that's when I started like firing off all these texts to you, just like, bro, this doesn't make sense. Why this? Why this? Why this? Why did they do this? This makes no sense at all. Like, just like a barrage of text messages as I was like basically live tweeting or live texting you about it. And it's like,
yeah, my phone was just blowing up. I was like, dear God, he is ripping this a new one now. Which I was in the same boat. When I went to see that in theaters, I was like, thank God, because as I've talked to you about recently, there's just been so much garbage. Like, everybody's putting out anything they've got because it's COVID and movies and everything's awful. So when Godzilla vs. Kong comes out, I'm like, oh, thank God. That's one I want to go to the theaters for. I can actually go see it now.
Yeah.
So it was a delightful treat to just grab some popcorn and just enjoy monsters kicking the crap out of each other. Yeah. I love it. It's great.
For sure.
That's all I need.
If I had to give this a grade, and it feels weird grading it because we haven't reviewed the other ones, even though we talked about them a lot here in this video.
How do you grade it with the other, the other two? What is this one to you?
Yeah. If I had to rank the three movies, I would say, fuck, man, that might just kind of speak to how low the bar is, I guess. I think the second one had the most potential. This one was always just going to be mindless fun. The second one had the most potential, and it tried to do some things that were ambitious. It tried to actually give meaning to its human characters and draw parallels between them and the monsters, which I appreciated. But it failed to actually pull it off. And again, we talked about how bad the writing and the dialogue was at times.
The motivation
and the fan service
too. I was like, oh, dear God, how
the fan service is atrocious. So I would say, just for enjoyment factor, I would probably give it to this because I appreciate the effects of this one more. The daylight fights, the action is well shot. And so I would probably go 3-2-1 in terms of my rankings, like Kong,
I would do the same.
King of the Monsters, and then the original. The original's last 10 minutes are fantastic, but there's way too much cock teasing going on until then.
Yeah, so much. I mean, the whole movie, and you just have such... I mean, I'm not trying to, bash on any of these actors, but the actors you had and the dialogue you gave them, you did not have enough to fill a movie without monsters. Like, that's the problem, is the last 10 minutes. Yeah, I'm down. If you did that the whole movie, or at least, consistently throughout the movie, we would have been talking a whole different thing there. But you just wasted so much of my time on stuff that I did not care about.
Yeah.
I think 3-2-1. I'm 100% with you. That's the order for sure.
I think if I had to give an individual grade to this, I would say a C+, and that's only because it's mindless fun. Like if I'm trying to actually like analyze and break down the story, I'm probably dropping to a C-.
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at. What grade would you give?
It's hard. I mean, honestly, like I might even like throw an A at it, just because. Okay. It's like I grade movies based off of what I'm expecting. When I go see Godzilla vs. Kong, I'm not expecting to see a story. Sure. It's the same way as Pacific Rim. I don't expect a story. I know it's going to be garbage. So it lived up to that. I think it was less annoying for me than 2. Mm-hmm. And I liked some of the characters more than 1. I mean, it's hard to say, but the fight scenes were so good that's the reason I came there, and they were better than they've been so far. So I would say I would give it an A for, visuals and fight scenes. And then obviously the story is, we're in probably, C+ territory.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that is weird that the second movie hinges so much on the communication device, where they're like, oh, Godzilla's vocal variant is a mixture of this and humans. It's like we were always the key. That was lame as shit when that happened anyway. I was like, oh. And then in this movie, they don't even use it. I'm like, did you forget you had the device? The guy that made it's right fucking there. He's doing
They did
nothing.
A couple of things. I can't remember who it was, but there were a couple of like screenshots of like a tablet or a computer or something. And it looked like they were using like Orca type technology. Okay. I mean, based off of the random images that they decided to associate with that device.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I thought it was hilarious in the last one. He's like, they're talking about the device and how they destroyed it, which at the time, I don't think Godzilla or anything had even been shown to the world, and they decided to destroy this. And the dad just gets so upset. And he's like, it shouldn't even exist. And I was like, it shouldn't exist when you were still talking to whales? Like, I don't know what you thought they were going to do with this technology. Like somebody was going to get a whole bunch of packs of wolves and start disrupting society. His like fierceness to that comment, I was just like, dying laughing, because I was like, that makes no sense, because when you created that, this was not even in the realm of possibility. So
that was just something that just popped into my head as we were giving the grades. I was like, wait a minute, why didn't they do that? Like, even with how many messages I fired off to you, I that still slipped by me, where I was like, that doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't you use that? But
the Orca, I think it got destroyed in the last one, right? Okay. I think when she's like in the Hummer or something, and then I think that gets thrown out, and then we just make the assumption that she dies. Could have gone either way,
King.
Yeah. Oh my
fucking
gosh.
Duke Nukem.
No, in a million years, no one would ever say that in that position. They would be like crying or doing something else. But every line of that movie, they were just like, one-liner, get ready, and fire.
Yeah.
Never would have happened. Not dialogue that people have in real life. And that just upsets me so much, because I'm like, please can you just pretend like this is what I'm actually watching?
Yeah.
Like,
and it's like a quote like that. Yeah, it's King of the Monsters, but like nobody says it's like, oh no, that's not a line from a Godzilla movie. You know what I mean? Like that's literally just a.
There's nothing special
thing.
To it.
Like it's like that feels so forced and ham-fisted. It just completely kind of withdraws you from the moment. But
I would have preferred if she just did the Jaws sound. She was like, "Dunno." Like, what? Okay, that's one direction. I don't know what just happened there, but I like it.
Yeah.
So,
but anyway, yeah. So Godzilla vs. Kong, fun, mindless action.
Fun.
Not a strong script, but
turn this puppy off. You're good to go.
If you go in knowing that, you'll have a good time. That's all we were looking for the most part, at least on first viewing. Second viewing, I decided to turn a critical eye, and I wish I had not. But
yeah, you can't look too much into it. You just kind of have to go with hell, they did it with half the script we don't need to explain this. Monsters, here you go.
Yep.
Good luck. Have fun. That's all you need to know.
Anyway, well, if you guys haven't already, drop a like, leave a comment below, subscribe to Cheap Pop, and we will be back in probably a week with the new film. We're still looking at a couple different options, but we're going to find something really interesting and a very different change of pace here. So we went horror. We went with like the big, summer blockbuster type film. And I think now we're going to reverse roles into something else unique as well. So we are nothing if not dynamic. But until next time, guys, peace.
Thanks, guys.